Jeffrey Dahmer was not born a monster. Before the headlines, before the crimes, before his name became synonymous with horror, there was a moment when help was still possible. What if the first murder never happened? What if intervention came before Jeffrey Dahmer crossed the line that history would never forgive? This is the story of a timeline where a single choice didn't just change history. It rewrote a life, a neighborhood, and the fate of people who were never meant to die. Stay with us. Welcome to the Butterfly Effect. If you enjoy stories that explore how small moments can reshape entire lives, you're in the right place. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next story, and leave a comment telling us where you're watching from. Now get comfortable, take a breath, and allow yourself to step into another timeline. Let's begin. Evelyn Carter was alone in her office in Bath, Ohio, in the late evening of 1999, reviewing patient notes she already knew by memory. The town outside was quiet in the way small places become after dark, when absence feels heavier than presence. As a psychiatrist, Evelyn had learned to recognize patterns before they hardened into behavior. She specialized in early intervention, in the fragile window where instability still spoke in symptoms rather than actions. Bath was not just where she worked, it was where she had grown up, where she had lived as a teenager, where in 1978, a house on her street had gone silent after the sudden death of someone she once called a friend. The interruption did not announce itself. The room did not collapse, nor did time shatter. It simply lost relevance. The ticking clock continued, but its rhythm detached from meaning. The walls felt distant, as if depth itself had thinned. Evelyn did not panic. Panic was loud. This was controlled. When Kronos spoke, there was no echo, no direction. His presence occupied awareness rather than space. He did not ask who she was or why she mattered. He stated what she already sensed. She was no longer inside time, but adjacent to it, temporarily removed from sequence. Paragraph 3, Kronos explained the nature of the mission without ceremony. Time, he said, does not change, it branches. Every decision creates divergence, most unnoticed, some catastrophic. Evelyn would be sent to a moment before a single act reshaped multiple lives. Unlike other interventions, this branch would not remain isolated. Whatever she altered would fold back into her own reality. If she succeeded, the people spared would continue living beside her in 1999. If she failed, nothing would soften the loss she already carried. Kronos did not describe this as mercy or punishment. He described it as coherence. She would not replace anyone central to the event. She would not confront history directly. Evelyn would assume the identity of a student in Bath, Ohio in 1977, ordinary, unremarkable, close enough to observe without drawing attention. Her proximity to Jeffrey Dahmer would be incidental, gradual, and dangerous. Kronos made this clear. She was not being sent to stop a crime, expose a threat, or deliver justice. She was being sent to interrupt a trajectory before it stabilized. Influence would come through patience, presence, and the slow normalization of help. Kronos warned her of resistance. Systems resist early intervention. People resist labels before catastrophe grants them clarity. Even success would not arrive cleanly. After the event was altered, a failure would follow immediately, not to undo the change, but to balance it. Relationships would fracture, motives would be questioned, isolation would replace certainty. Time, Kronos said, demands compensation for every deviation. Evelyn asked if the outcome would be better. Kronos did not answer. He never confirmed improvement, only difference. Evelyn did not ask if she could refuse. Refusal, she understood, belonged to a version of herself that no longer existed. Kronos told her the year, 1977, and the condition for return. The task must be completed. No retreat, no observation from a distance. As the office slowly regained its weight and sound, Kronos withdrew without farewell. Time folded inward, opening space for another beginning. Somewhere behind her, Bath remained unchanged. Somewhere ahead, in the same town decades earlier, a future still waited to be disturbed. Evelyn woke to the sound of breathing that did not belong to her memory. It took several seconds to understand it was her own. The room was small, unfamiliar, and sharply present. Walls closer than she expected, air heavier, colder. She sat up slowly, noticing the stiffness in her limbs, the unfamiliar weight of a younger body. The mirror across the room reflected a version of herself she had never lived as. A teenager, ordinary, anonymous. When she spoke, testing her voice, the words came naturally. English, unbroken, no confusion. no hesitation. Whatever Kronos had altered, language and memory remained intact. Bath, Ohio, in 1977 revealed itself gradually. The streets were narrower than she remembered, less worn. Houses stood intact, paint unpeeled by decades. The town felt quieter, but not peaceful, more like a place still deciding what it would become. Evelyn recognized landmarks she had not seen in over 20 years. The grocery store, the school, the street where she once lived, now observed from the outside. She understood then the precision of Kronos' choice. This was not just the past. It was her past, before loss had given it shape. The memories of what would happen pressed in without warning. Not visions, recollections. She remembered the summer after graduation in 1978, the sudden death, the rumors that followed, the way fear crept into conversations that had once been casual. She remembered learning years later what history would name that beginning, how it would grow into something vast and unspeakable. 17 victims. Years of violence concentrated in silence. Families erased from ordinary futures. Evelyn had not studied these events as a case. She had lived beside their origin. She remembered the man at the center of it all, not as the figure history would fixate on, but as a presence on the edge of memory. Quiet, detached, drinking too early, too often. Someone most people described as strange, then forgettable. She understood now how proximity had failed him, how systems waited for certainty before acting. By the time clarity arrived, it had already cost lives. The knowledge settled heavily. If she did nothing, the sequence would unfold exactly as she remembered it. Time would not hesitate. Evelyn adjusted to the role she had been given. A student, a transfer, no authority, no credibility beyond what she could earn through patience. Her days filled with classrooms, hallways, routines that felt trivial against the weight of what she carried. She watched carefully, measuring distance, learning where presence could become influence without exposure. Every interaction felt deliberate. Every choice felt constrained. Kronos had not sent her back with power. He had sent her back with proximity, and the risk that came with it. That night, lying awake in a borrowed bed, Evelyn listened to the town settle into sleep. Somewhere nearby, lives continued unaware of how close they stood to rupture. Somewhere within that quiet, a future still waited to take shape. She understood now why Kronos had warned her. Knowing what would happen did not grant control. It granted responsibility. The past did not feel malleable, it felt fragile. And for the first time since arriving, Evelyn felt the full weight of what failure would mean, not abstractly, but personally, permanently. Evelyn did not approach him immediately. Proximity, she knew, was not created by intention, but by repetition. Hallways, classrooms, shared silences. She placed herself where coincidence could do the work for her. He was easy to overlook, which was precisely how he survived socially. Present, but unclaimed. Teachers spoke to him rarely. Students spoke around him, not to him. He existed in the margins, a condition Evelyn recognized too well. People like that were not invisible. They were simply untreated. When they first spoke, it was unremarkable. A comment about an assignment, a shared wait outside a classroom. His responses were brief, measured, guarded. He did not avoid her, but he did not invite continuation either. Evelyn kept her tone neutral, her interest restrained. She knew how quickly curiosity could feel like threat. What she offered instead was consistency. She returned to the same places. She repeated small gestures. Over time, familiarity replaced suspicion. She noticed patterns before they became language. The way he flinched from prolonged attention, the reliance on alcohol to dull discomfort rather than to socialize, the difficulty sustaining connection without withdrawing. These were not confessions. They were signals. Evelyn understood the danger of interpretation without confirmation, but she also understood the greater danger of waiting. He did not speak of harm. He spoke of loneliness, of things feeling distant, of people leaving without explanation. She listened without correcting. The town remained indifferent. Guidance counselors filed reports only when disruption occurred. Teachers tolerated silence as compliance. The system functioned as designed, reactive, not preventative. Evelyn felt the weight of that design every day. She knew that nothing she observed would qualify as evidence. Not yet. Everything still existed in the gray space where intervention was considered intrusive rather than necessary. This was the moment history preferred to forget, before certainty made action respectable. As weeks passed, his guardedness shifted subtly. He spoke more freely in controlled settings. He stayed present longer, not progress, stability. Evelyn avoided becoming central to his routine. Dependency would distort everything. Instead, she introduced ideas indirectly, conversations about help, about professionals whose role was to listen without judgment. She framed intervention not as correction, but as relief. He resisted at first, not aggressively, quietly. Resistance born from fear of being seen too clearly. Evelyn understood then the precision of Kronos' warning. This was the most dangerous phase, not violence, but possibility. The future had not yet hardened. The path could still bend. But proximity cut both ways. Every step closer increased her influence and her risk. She was not intervening in a vacuum. She was standing at the edge of a life that history would later define by what came next. And for the first time, she felt the cost of being early, alone, uncertain, and unseen. Resistance did not arrive as hostility. It arrived as procedure, small interruptions disguised as concern, a teacher asking why Evelyn spent time with someone so withdrawn, a counselor suggesting she broaden her circle. None of it was accusatory, it was administrative. The system had noticed deviation and responded with containment of its own. Evelyn understood this instinct well. Institutions do not reject early warnings, they soften them until they disappear. He felt it too, the subtle tightening of attention, the way adults began to watch rather than ignore. He withdrew slightly, not in anger but in self-protection. His words shortened, his posture closed. Evelyn recognized the shift immediately. Proximity had done its work, but now it had consequences. She adjusted, increasing distance without severing contact. Influence, she knew, survived only when it did not provoke scrutiny. The conversations that followed were more fragile. He spoke less about loneliness and more about control, about wanting things to remain predictable, unchanging. Not violent language, precise language, the kind that revealed fear disguised as order. Evelyn resisted the urge to correct. Correction at this stage would feel like exposure. Instead, she listened, anchoring the dialogue to safety rather than interpretation. She framed help as structure, not intervention. Outside their conversations, the town continued as if nothing were unfolding beneath its surface. That normality was part of the danger. Evelyn remembered how history would later describe these months as uneventful. No signs, no warnings. She now understood how misleading that was. The absence of spectacle was not absence of risk. It was the condition that allowed it to grow unchecked. The pressure escalated quietly. A meeting with a counselor. Questions framed as concern for her well-being. Suggestions that her attention was misplaced. Evelyn felt the weight of Kronos' warning take shape. This was the failure that followed success. Not collapse, but isolation. Even before the outcome had shifted, the cost was arriving. She was becoming visible in the wrong way. That night, Evelyn understood something history never records. Resistance is not proof that intervention is wrong. It is proof that it is early. The system preferred clarity to prevention, aftermath to foresight. She lay awake, measuring each future choice against the narrowing margin she was allowed. The path had begun to bend, but it had not yet committed. And time, as Kronos had promised, was already demanding balance. Containment did not arrive as insight, but as accumulated exhaustion. Weeks of silent tension condensed into a conversation neither of them had scheduled, yet both had been avoiding. Jeff spoke of sleepless nights, of intrusive thoughts that returned to the same points again and again, of a growing need to control his surroundings in order to quiet fear. He avoided extreme language. He spoke of fatigue, of loneliness, of a persistent sense that people drifted away before he could understand them. Evelyn recognized the pattern immediately. This was not confession. It was the opening that precedes loss of control. As a psychiatrist, Evelyn did not focus on visible behavior, but on what sustained it. She spoke about recurring fantasies that intensify when left without containment, about how a deep fear of abandonment can distort attachment, transforming closeness into possession. She explained that, in certain psychological structures, the mind begins to confuse presence with permanence and control with safety. Alcohol, she said, did not create the problem. It merely lowered the remaining barriers. Jeff listened in silence, tense. For the first time, he did not look away when she described the risk of those impulses moving beyond thought. Evelyn then applied a technique she knew well, responsible anticipation. She did not speak of crimes or explicit violence. She spoke of escalation, of how unchecked fantasies tend to demand increasingly extreme reinforcement, of how the attempt to avoid abandonment can evolve into the need to prevent loss at any cost, of how, when that happens, risk no longer remains internal. Other people inevitably enter the equation. Jeff reacted with visible discomfort, not anger, fear. Fear of recognizing something within himself that he would not be able to control alone. When he asked what would happen if he accepted help, Evelyn answered with clinical precision. She explained that hospitalization was not punishment nor moral judgment, but structured containment, a space where fantasies would be interrupted before crystallizing into action, where supervision existed to protect, not only him, but anyone who might be involved if the process continued unchecked. She warned that the initial experience would feel like a loss of autonomy, that the process would feel invasive, but she was clear that the alternative was not neutrality, it was progression. Jeff did not respond immediately. He returned days later. That return confirmed that fear had surpassed denial. From that point, the system moved with uncomfortable speed. Psychological evaluations, reports, discrete meetings followed. The decision was framed as clinical precaution in the presence of potential risk, not as response to an act already committed. His family was involved carefully, confused, frightened, but cooperative. On the morning of admission, Jeff rode silently in the back seat of the car. The route was ordinary to the point of dissonance. No dramatic scene unfolded. Only the sense that something severe had been interrupted before taking form. Inside the psychiatric facility, everything was methodical. Belongings catalogued, rules explained, continuous observation established. When Jeff changed into institutional clothing, his posture shifted. Not relief, containment. Before the door closed, he looked back at Evelyn. The glance asked for neither rescue nor forgiveness. It recognized a boundary. It acknowledged that, if left alone, he would not know where control would end. Evelyn met his gaze without softening the decision. She knew her direct influence ended there. As the corridor absorbed him, success settled in silence. The trajectory she had been sent to interrupt no longer advanced. The future she remembered loosened its grip. But the cost arrived immediately. Isolation, questioning, social distance. Kronos had been exact. Every early intervention demands compensation. Evelyn understood then that prevention leaves no proof. It leaves absence. And she would have to live with that absence, knowing that by containing invisible impulses, she had protected lives that would never know how close they had come to vanishing. Evelyn woke to familiarity. The weight of her body in the bed, the muted light through the curtains, the distant sound of traffic outside her apartment in Bath, Ohio. For a brief moment, she assumed failure. The present felt unchanged, intact, indifferent. There was no sensation of travel, no lingering disorientation. Time had not announced her return. It had simply resumed, as if nothing had interrupted it. She moved through the apartment on instinct, grounding herself in routine. Coffee, the radio, the clock on the wall confirming the year, 1999. Nothing appeared fractured. No memory felt displaced. The world had not shifted visibly. Kronos had warned her this would be the most unsettling part, that a successful alteration would not announce itself. It would hide inside continuity. Her first conscious decision was professional, not emotional. She searched for records, hospital archives, local news databases. She typed the name carefully, half expecting resistance from the screen itself. The result appeared without delay. Jeffrey Dahmer remained institutionalized. Age 39, still alive. No history of serial violence, no national infamy, no prison death in 1994. The absence was precise, surgical. History had adjusted exactly where it needed to, and nowhere else. Evelyn sat back, letting the confirmation settle. The relief was present, but muted. This was not victory. It was alignment. The trajectory she had interrupted had never reasserted itself. The system had contained what it once ignored. 17 lives had not been erased because they had never been threatened. The world had not become safer. It had simply avoided one specific collapse. Only then did she search for the name that mattered most. Her former neighbor, her friend. The house that had once gone silent. The result was immediate and disorienting. The woman lived abroad now, married, children, a life that extended uninterrupted beyond 1978. No mention of tragedy, no footnote in criminal history. The absence Evelyn had carried for decades had been replaced, not with memory, but with continuation. Evelyn closed the browser and sat in the quiet of her apartment, understanding what Kronos had meant. The cost had already been paid. She remembered a life no one else had lost. She carried a grief that no longer existed in the world around her. Time had accepted the change and folded it seamlessly into her reality. The mission was complete, not because the world was better, but because one specific future no longer existed. Kronos did not appear immediately. He never did when the task ended. Evelyn understood this delay as part of the design. Completion, in this universe, was never marked by ceremony. Days passed. Routine reasserted itself. Her work continued. Her world remained intact. And yet, something fundamental had shifted, not outwardly, but internally. She carried two histories now, the one everyone lived in and the one only she remembered losing. When Kronos finally returned, there was no transition. He occupied the space between moments, present without arrival. His voice did not ask for a report. Outcomes did not interest him in that way. He observed instead the subtle redistribution of absence, the quiet normalization of lives that continued uninterrupted. 17 men lived without knowing they had ever been in danger. A woman raised a family in a country she would never have fled. The world did not notice the correction. Evelyn asked the question she had carried since her return. Whether this had been good, whether the change justified the cost. Kronos did not respond directly. He spoke instead of balance, of how time resists extremes, not just catastrophe, but perfection. The removal of one collapse did not cleanse the world. Violence remained. Injustice persisted. Suffering reorganized itself elsewhere. What had been prevented was not evil itself, but concentration. He reminded her of the failure that followed success. Isolation, doubt, the quiet erosion of certainty. These were not punishments. They were compensations. Time does not tolerate clean interventions, Kronos said. Every deviation demands weight on the other side of the scale. Evelyn had accepted that weight knowingly. The difference now was permanence. She would live the rest of her life remembering a grief no one else carried. Evelyn realized then what made this mission distinct. The change had not elevated her. It had anchored her. She could not claim heroism for an outcome that left no monument. She could not share the truth without destabilizing the balance she had created. What remained was responsibility. Quiet, unacknowledged, irreversible. Kronos watched as understanding settled, not as relief, but as acceptance. Before withdrawing, Kronos left her with a final observation. History, he said, is rarely shaped by those who act when events become visible. It is shaped by those who intervene while everything still looks ordinary. Then he was gone, not into the future or the past, but out of relevance. Evelyn remained in a world that would never know how close it had come to fracture, and that, Kronos had taught her, was equilibrium. The world you live in feels solid because you inherited it, not because it was inevitable. Every street, every name in a history book, every life that quietly continued exists because countless decisions never made headlines. Some disasters are remembered precisely because they happened. Others are forgotten because they never did. This was the story of a timeline where intervention came before certainty, where danger was recognized while it still looked ordinary, where lives were saved not through heroism, but through containment, patience, and the courage to act without witnesses. Kronos never called this a victory, and perhaps that is the point. A world spared from collapse does not celebrate. It simply continues, unaware of how close it came to breaking. If this story made you pause, if it made you question how fragile history truly is, then stay with us. Like the video, subscribe so you don't miss the next story, and tell us where you're watching from. Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine the world not as it is, but as it almost wasn't. Then open them again, and confront the question history never allows us to test. What if?